The emergency call came on a Friday evening when the airport was winding down for the weekend. Terrell had just finished changing the oil on a small Cessna and was wiping his hands on an old rag, thinking about the leftover pizza waiting for him at home. He'd been on his feet for 14 hours straight, the third double shift this week. His back ached, but his bank account ached worse. "Hey, Terrell. Phone for you," called out Miguel, the night shift supervisor, holding out the receiver, with an apologetic look. "Big emergency on the private runway." Terrell sighed, taking the phone. "This is Terrell." The voice on the other end belonged to the airport operations manager, sounding more stressed than usual. "We've got a situation with a Gulfstream G650 on the private runway. Hydraulic failure, can't move it, and the owner's raising hell. Regular. Team can't figure it out." "My shift ended 20 minutes ago," Terrell said, glancing at the clock on the wall. "Triple overtime," the manager offered immediately. "And the owner's Alexandra Winters." Terrell paused. Everyone in the aviation world knew that name. Tech billionaire, founder of Winter Innovations, and owner of one of the largest private jet fleets in the country. She was also known for being impossibly demanding. "I'll be there in 10, Terrell said, hanging up before he could change his mind. In the locker room, he splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection. Dark circles under bloodshot eyes looked back at him. 3 months of double shifts were taking their toll, but his mother's medical bills weren't paying themselves. The nursing home had sent another notice yesterday. Payment due, or they'd have to reconsider her care arrangement. The thought of moving her again, especially after her stroke, made his stomach twist. Terrell grabbed his specialized toolkit and headed for the private runway. The night air was cool against his face. As he drove the maintenance cart across the airfield, runway lights blinking in the distance like fallen stars, he could see the sleek silhouette of the Gulfstream ahead, bright work lights surrounding it like it was on stage. As he pulled up, he noticed a cluster of people standing near the aircraft. Most wore maintenance uniforms and looked defeated. Apart from them stood a slim woman in an impeccable suit, her arms crossed as she spoke sharply into a phone. Even from a distance, Terrell could feel the tension radiating from her. One of the mechanics spotted him and walked over, relief evident on his face. "Man, am I glad to see you. We've been at this for 2 hours. Something's wrong with the hydraulic system, but it's not showing up in any diagnostics." "What are the symptoms?" Terrell asked, already opening his toolkit. "Pressure's dropping in the main landing gear system. We've checked all the obvious stuff. No visible leaks, all connections tight, reservoir levels normal." Terrell nodded, his mind already running through possibilities. "Let me take a look." As he approached the aircraft, the woman in the suit ended her call and turned to him, her gaze sharp and assessing. Up close, Terrell realized she was younger than he'd expected, maybe early 30s, with intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Are you another mechanic?" she asked, her voice clipped. "Yes, ma'am, Terrell Jackson. I specialize in hydraulic systems." "Alexandra Winters," she replied, though the introduction was unnecessary. "I need this jet operational in the next 3 hours. I have a meeting in San Francisco tomorrow morning that will determine whether my company acquires our main competitor or gets swallowed by them instead." Terrell nodded, not intimidated by her intensity. "I understand. I'll need to do a complete system check before I can give you a timeline." She looked like she wanted to argue, but instead gestured toward the aircraft. "Do what you need to do." Terrell got to work immediately, setting up portable lights underneath the massive jet. The Gulfstream G650 was a beautiful piece of engineering, one of the fastest civilian aircraft in the sky, with a price tag of about $70 million. He'd worked on them before, but usually in scheduled maintenance, not emergency situations on darkened runways. He started with a visual inspection, meticulously examining every hydraulic line, every connection, every possible point of failure. The other mechanics hovered nearby, offering theories and suggestions, but Terrell barely heard them. He was in his zone now, his fatigue temporarily forgotten as he lost himself in the puzzle before him. An hour passed, then 2. The other mechanics eventually drifted away, called to other duties. Only Alexandra Winters remained, alternating between pacing near the jet stairs and sitting in a folding chair someone had brought her, working intensely on a tablet. Occasionally, she would approach him. "Any progress?" "Still diagnosing," Terrell would answer, not looking up from his work. At hour 3, he found something strange, a tiny metal splinter lodged in a check valve, too small to be caught by the filters but just big enough to cause the valve to stick intermittently. It was an unusual problem, one that wouldn't show up in standard diagnostics. "I think I found the issue," he called out, sliding out from under the aircraft. Alexandra was by his side instantly. "Can you fix it?" "Yes, but I'll need to remove this valve assembly and clean it out completely. There's a metal fragment causing it to malfunction." "How long?" 2 hours, maybe 3. Her expression darkened. "That's cutting it too close, can't you just replace the part?" Terrell shook his head. "We don't stock this particular assembly for the G650. Would have to fly it in, and that would take longer." She ran a hand through her hair, a gesture that made her seem suddenly human rather than the intimidating billionaire. "Do what you have to do," she said finally. Terrell nodded and got back to work. He carefully removed the valve assembly, a complex component that controlled pressure to the landing gear. Working under a portable magnifier, he disassembled it, piece by piece, laying each part out in precise order on a clean shop towel. The night grew colder, and his fingers started to stiffen, but he kept going. This kind of meticulous work required total concentration. One mistake, one misaligned part, and the whole system could fail catastrophically during flight. He was so focused that he didn't notice Alexandra approaching until she spoke. "You've been working for hours without a break," she said, her voice softer than before. She held out a steaming cup of coffee. "Thought you might need this." Surprised, Terrell accepted the cup. "Thank you." "My pilot says you're the best mechanic at this airport," she said, crouching down to see what he was working on. "Says you can diagnose problems just by listening to an engine." Terrell felt a flicker of pride but shrugged it off. "Just experience. That's all. Been fixing things since I was a kid." "Where did you learn about aircraft?" "Community college, then military. Air Force for 6 years working on F-16s. After that, got my civilian certifications and ended up here." She nodded, studying him with interest. "Why not work for one of the big manufacturers? Boeing, Airbus? They pay better than regional airports." Terrell paused, wondering how much to share with this stranger who lived in a world so different from his own. "My mother got sick. Needed to stay close to home." Understanding flickered across her face. "Family obligations can change our paths, sometimes for the better," he replied, returning to the tiny components spread before him. He'd found the metal splinter and was now carefully cleaning each part. Alexandra didn't move away as he expected. Instead, she continued watching him. "I work." "Most people would be nervous having me watch over their shoulder," she observed. "Aircraft don't care who's watching," Terrell said simply. "They either work right or they don't. And at 30,000 feet, don't isn't an option." This drew a genuine smile from her. "A practical philosophy. I like that." As the night wore on, Terrell reassembled the valve with practiced precision, then reinstalled it in the aircraft. He ran a series of tests, checking and double-checking his work. By the time the eastern sky began to lighten, he was running a final system diagnostic. "Well?" Alexandra asked, appearing at his side. She looked remarkably put together despite the all-night wait. Though Terrell noticed the dark circles under, her eyes matched his own. "System's holding pressure perfectly," he said, showing her the tablet with the diagnostic results. "The metal fragment is removed, all components cleaned and reinstalled. You're good to fly." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you," she said, and for once the words didn't sound practiced or obligatory. As Terrell packed up his tools, Alexandra conferred with her pilot, who nodded repeatedly while looking in Terrell's direction. The first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Despite his exhaustion, Terrell felt the satisfaction of a difficult job well done. When Alexandra approached him again, she held an envelope. "Your payment," she said, extending it to him. I added a bonus. What you did tonight saved my company's future. Terrell took the envelope with a nod of thanks, too tired for many words. He just wanted to go home, shower, and sleep for a day straight. But Alexandra didn't turn away. Instead, she seemed to be studying him with new interest, as if seeing something she hadn't noticed before. The morning sun cast long shadows across the runway as Terrell examined the Gulfstream's complex hydraulic system. He'd been working on the jet for over 3 hours now, and the impossible fix was proving to be exactly that, seemingly impossible. His shirt clung to his back with sweat despite the cool morning air, and the ache in his shoulders had settled into a dull, constant throb. Any progress? Alexandra Winter's voice came from behind him, making him jump slightly. The billionaire had been checking on him every half hour like clockwork. Found part of the problem, Terrell said, wiping his brow with his forearm. There's something wrong with the secondary pressure valve that's not showing up in the diagnostics. Alexandra frowned, crossing her arms over her expensive blazer. My technical team in New York says it must be the main pump. They're certain, with all due respect to your team, Terrell replied, not looking up from the access panel. They're not here with their hands in the system. This isn't the main pump. He expected her to be offended by his directness, but instead, she crouched down, beside him, careful to keep her tailored pants from touching the ground. Show me, she said simply. Surprised, Terrell pointed to the components he'd been examining. See this valve assembly? It should move freely when I apply pressure here, but it's sticking. And there's a sound. Listen. He manipulated the component, and a faint clicking noise emerged. That's not normal, he explained. It should be smooth and silent. Alexandra tilted her head, listening intently. You're right, I can hear it. She glanced at him with new interest. How did you know to check this when the diagnostics missed it? Terrell shrugged. Experience, I guess. And the way the system was failing didn't match what a pump issue would look like. Plus, I've worked on a lot of aircraft over the years. They talk to you if you listen right. My technical team costs millions a year, and they missed what you found in a few hours, she said, more to herself than to him. They're probably very good at what they do, Terrell offered diplomatically. But sometimes you need hands-on experience. With a specific system. Alexandra stood up, brushing imaginary dust from her knees. How much longer to fix it? Terrell surveyed the complex system before him. Hard to say. I need to fabricate a special tool to reach the valve without removing the entire assembly. Could take another 4 hours. I need to be in San Francisco by noon, she said, checking her watch. It was already 7 a.m. I'll do my best, Terrell promised, already thinking through the steps he'd need to take. To his surprise, Alexandra didn't walk away. Instead, she took a seat on a nearby equipment case, pulled out her phone, and made a call. Jeffrey, I need to reschedule the meeting to 3 p.m. No, that's not negotiable. Yes, I understand the implications. Well, tell the board that unless they want to swim to San Francisco, they'll need to adjust their schedules. She ended the call and noticed Terrell watching her. Problem solved, she said with a tight smile. You have until 1 p.m. Thank you, Terrell said sincerely. As he turned back to his work, Alexandra remained seated nearby, her fingers flying across her phone screen. Occasionally she made brief calls, her voice shifting between commanding, persuasive, and, when necessary, intimidating. Terrell found himself working with an audience for the next hour. It should have made him nervous, but instead he found her presence oddly calming. She didn't hover or ask pointless questions. She simply worked on her own tasks while he worked on his. Your airport manager mentioned you've been working double shifts for months, she said suddenly during a lull in her calls. Terrell glanced up, surprised she knew this detail. Yeah, trying to save up some extra money. For anything in particular? He hesitated, then decided there was no harm in telling the truth. Medical bills, my mom had a stroke last year. Insurance covered some, but not all. And now she needs specialized care. Alexandra's expression softened almost imperceptibly. That's a heavy burden to carry alone. Not alone exactly. I have a younger sister who helps when she can, but she's finishing nursing school. Figured one of us should get to follow their dreams. He smiled to show he wasn't bitter. "And what's your dream, if you don't mind me asking?" The question caught Terrell off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked him that. He needed a moment to remember. "I wanted to start my own aircraft maintenance company," he said finally, "specializing in custom modifications and difficult repairs, the kind other shops turn away." "Why haven't you?" "Starting capital mainly. Aviation is expensive. Equipment, certifications, insurance, hangar space. It adds up fast, and now with my mom's care." He trailed off, focusing on carefully bending a piece of metal into the shape he needed. Alexandra was quiet for so long that Terrell thought she had lost interest. But when he looked up, he found her watching him thoughtfully. "What would you need to get started, ballpark figure?" Terrell laughed, assuming she was making conversation. "500,000, minimum. Probably closer to 1 million to do it right." She nodded as if he'd just told her the weather forecast. "And what would make your company different? There are plenty of maintenance shops already." Something in her tone made him take the question seriously. "Knowledge and flexibility. Most shops follow the manual exactly, which is fine for routine maintenance. But when something unusual happens, like this valve issue, they're lost. I'd focus on the problems no one else can solve, using both traditional methods and new technology." His makeshift tool finally took shape and he slid back under the access panel. The work required his full attention now, manipulating the special tool to reset the valve without removing the entire hydraulic assembly. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked in the confined space. Nearby, Alexandra had fallen silent, apparently absorbed in something on her tablet. The only sounds were the occasional distant rumble of aircraft and the metallic clicks as Terrell's tool made contact with the valve. After nearly 45 minutes of painstaking work, he felt the valve suddenly give way and reset into its proper position. "Got it," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "You fixed it?" Alexandra asked, immediately attentive. "Think so. Need to run a pressure test to be sure." He slid out from under the panel and moved to the cockpit to run the diagnostic system. Alexandra followed, standing in the doorway as he worked. The pressure gauge on the screen slowly climbed, holding steady where before it had fluctuated wildly. Terrell waited, watching for any sign of failure, but the system remained stable. "We're good," he announced finally. "Hydraulic system is functioning normally." Relief washed over Alexandra's face. "You're sure it's safe to fly?" "I'd stake my life on it," Terrell said confidently. "And I wouldn't say that if I wasn't 100% certain." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I believe you. Thank you." As Terrell began gathering his tools, Alexandra made a quick call to her pilot, who had been resting in the airport lounge. Within minutes, the rest of her team began arriving. Her personal assistant, security personnel, and 2 business associates in suits that probably cost more than Terrell made in a month. The pilot approached Terrell directly. "The system checks. Out. Yes, sir. Had a sticky pressure valve that was causing the pressure drop. It's reset and functioning normally now. I also checked the rest of the hydraulics while I was in there. Everything else looks good." The pilot nodded, clearly impressed. "Nice work. Most people would have just replaced the entire assembly." "Would have taken too long," Terrell explained, "and wasn't necessary." As the pilot headed off to begin pre-flight checks, Alexandra approached. Again, her assistant hovering nearby with a tablet. "Your invoice," she said, gesturing to the assistant who turned the tablet toward Terrell. The amount displayed made his eyes widen. It was nearly 10 times the standard rate for emergency repairs. "There must be a mistake," he said, looking up at her. "This is way too much, is it?" Alexandra raised an eyebrow. "You just saved me from missing a meeting that will determine a multi-billion-dollar acquisition." "I'd say you're undercharging. I was just doing my job," Terrell insisted. "Most people just do their jobs. You solved a problem my entire technical team couldn't figure out, using a tool you made yourself, all while working your 3rd double shift this week." Her tone made it clear she wasn't going to argue about the payment. Terrell signed the invoice, still uncomfortable with the amount, but recognizing the futility of protesting further. As the ground crew prepared the jet for departure, Alexandra lingered, watching Terrell pack up his tools with methodical care. "You know," she said casually, "I'm always looking for people who can solve problems others can't." Terrell glanced up, not sure how to respond. "My company is developing new aviation technology," she continued. "More efficient engines, advanced materials, smarter systems. But we have a gap between the engineers who design the technology and the practical application in actual aircraft." "Sounds interesting," Terrell said cautiously, wondering where she was going with this. "It would be a consulting position initially. You'd review designs, test prototypes, provide feedback based on your real-world experience." She handed him a business card. "Think about it. Call that number when you're ready to talk details." Before Terrell could respond, her assistant approached to inform her the jet was ready for boarding. Alexandra gave him one last appraising look. "You're wasted on routine oil changes, Terrell. You should be solving the problems no one else can." With that, she turned and walked toward the jet, her team falling in around her. Terrell stood holding her business card, watching as the ground crew removed the stairs after she boarded. As the powerful engines roared to life, he pocketed the card and gathered his toolbox. He was exhausted, dirty, and desperately in need of sleep. But as he watched the sleek jet taxi toward the runway, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. A spark of possibility, a glimpse of a different future than the endless double shifts stretching before him. The Gulf Stream accelerated down the runway and lifted gracefully into the morning sky, banking west toward San Francisco. Terrell watched until it was just a glint of sunlight against the blue, then turned toward the maintenance hangar, his mind racing with thoughts of what might come next. Terrell watched as Alexandra's jet disappeared into the clouds, then drove his maintenance cart back to the hangar. His body felt heavy with exhaustion, but his mind was surprisingly alert, turning over the strange encounter with the billionaire. Her business card sat in his pocket, feeling somehow heavier than it should. "Heard you fixed the Winters jet," Miguel said as Terrell returned his borrowed tools. "Nobody thought it could be done without replacing half the hydraulic system." Terrell shrugged. "Just needed patience and the right approach." "Well, the airport manager is singing your praises. Says Ms. Winters herself called to compliment your work before they even took off." This surprised Terrell. People like Alexandra Winters didn't usually take time to call managers about good service. They only made calls when they were unhappy. After cleaning up and clocking out, Terrell drove home in his aging pickup truck, the morning sun now fully risen and beating down on the cracked dashboard. His small apartment was quiet and cool when he entered, the blinds drawn against the day. Without bothering to eat, he showered quickly and fell into bed, Alexandra's business card placed carefully on his nightstand. He slept deeply for 6 hours, then woke to his phone ringing. It was his sister Delia. "Hey, I'm at Mom's care facility," she said when he answered. "They're saying they never received last month's payment." Terrell sat up, running a hand over his face. "That's not possible. I paid it 2 weeks ago." "Well, they're threatening to reduce her therapy sessions if we don't sort it out today." "I'll be there in 30 minutes, he said, already getting up. Sleep would have to wait. The next few hours passed in a blur of bureaucratic frustration. The care facility had indeed received his payment, but had applied it to the wrong account. By the time it was sorted out, Terrell had missed the beginning of his evening shift and had to call in. His supervisor was understanding, but warned that they couldn't keep making exceptions no matter how good a mechanic he was. It was nearly 8 in the evening when he finally returned home, too tired to even feel hungry. He collapsed onto his couch and noticed the business card still sitting on his nightstand. On impulse, he picked it up and examined it. It was made of heavy, textured paper with just a phone number embossed in silver. No name, no company, no title. Typical Alexandra Winters, assuming everyone would know who she was. After a moment's hesitation, he dialed the number, not really expecting anyone to answer at this hour. To his surprise, the call was answered on the second ring. "This is Alexandra Winters." Her voice was clear and focused, just as he remembered. This is Terrell Jackson. From the airport this morning, I fixed your jet." There was a pause, and he wondered if she even remembered who he was. She must meet dozens of people every day. "Terrell," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "I was hoping you'd call. I was curious about what you mentioned, the consulting position. Are you free tomorrow? I'll be back in town and we could discuss it over lunch." Terrell glanced at his work schedule pinned to the refrigerator. He was supposed to work a double shift again. "I'd have to rearrange some things at work." "Do that," she said, not unkindly but with the confidence of someone used to people rearranging their schedules for her. "I'll send a car for you at noon. Text this number with your address." Before he could respond, she continued, "And Terrell, bring examples of your work. Photos, documentation, anything that showcases your problem-solving skills." After ending the call, Terrell sat in his quiet apartment, wondering if he was dreaming. Consulting for winter innovations? It seemed impossible, yet the business card in his hand was real enough. The next day, precisely at noon, a sleek black car pulled up outside his apartment building. The driver, professionally courteous, opened the door for him and confirmed his identity before setting off toward downtown. Terrell had spent the morning gathering documentation of his most challenging repairs, along with photos he'd taken of his custom solutions to unusual problems. His supervisor had been surprisingly supportive about him taking the day off, especially after Terrell mentioned it was for a meeting with Alexandra Winters. The car took him to one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, situated on the top floor of a gleaming skyscraper. As the elevator rose silently, Terrell felt increasingly out of place in his best shirt and only decent pair of slacks. The maitre d' led him to a private dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Alexandra was already there, reading something on a tablet. She looked up as he entered and set the device aside. "Terrell, thank you for coming," she said, rising to shake his hand. Today she wore a simple but obviously expensive blue dress that made her look both powerful and approachable. "Please, sit down." As he took a seat across from her, Terrell noticed the table was already set with water glasses and bread, but no menus. Before he could mention this, a waiter appeared with 2 plates. "I took the liberty of ordering for us," Alexandra explained. "The chef here makes an excellent grilled salmon." The food looked and smelled incredible. Terrell couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten at a restaurant that didn't have the menu displayed above the counter. "So," Alexandra said once the waiter had left, "tell me more about your background. You mentioned Air Force experience." As they ate, Terrell found himself telling her about his 6 years servicing fighter jets, the challenges of keeping complex aircraft operational in desert conditions, and the specialized training he'd received. Alexandra listened attentively, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed her deep technical knowledge. "What about your education?" she asked as their plates were cleared. 2-year degree in aviation maintenance technology. Started a bachelor's in aerospace engineering but had to put that on hold when my mom got sick. She nodded. "And the projects you brought?" Terrell pulled out his tablet and showed her photos and documentation of his most challenging repairs. He explained each one, detailing the problems he'd encountered and the solutions he'd developed. Alexandra studied the images with intense focus. "This modification to the fuel delivery system, it's not standard procedure." "No, it's my own design. The standard fix wouldn't work because of space constraints in that particular aircraft model. My solution improved fuel efficiency by 4% over the manufacturer's specifications." Her eyebrows raised slightly. "Did you patent it?" "No, ma'am. Didn't even think about it." "You should have," she said, swiping to the next image. "What's this?" "That's a diagnostic tool I built. The aircraft had an intermittent electrical issue that only appeared during flight. No ground test could replicate it. So I designed this to monitor the system in flight and identify exactly when and where the failure occurred." As they went through his projects, Terrell found himself relaxing. This wasn't just a job interview. It was a conversation between 2 people who understood and respected the complexities of aviation technology. After dessert, a delicate chocolate creation that probably cost more than Terrell's weekly grocery budget, Alexandra sat back and regarded him thoughtfully. You have an intuitive understanding of aircraft systems that can't be taught, she said finally. You see connections and solutions that others miss. That's rare and valuable. Terrell felt a flush of pride at her words. Thank you. Here's what I'm proposing, Alexandra continued, leaning forward slightly. Winter Innovations is developing new aviation technologies, as I mentioned yesterday, but we're having integration issues. Brilliant engineers designing components that look perfect on paper but fail in real-world applications. She paused, taking a sip of water. I want you to be our reality check. Review designs, test prototypes, provide feedback based on your practical experience. Initially as a consultant 3 days a week. If it works out, we can discuss a permanent position. Terrell's heart raced. This was exactly the kind of opportunity he'd dreamed of. Working with cutting-edge technology, solving complex problems, using both his hands-on skills and his technical knowledge. The compensation, Alexandra continued, naming a figure that made Terrell blink in surprise, would be for the consulting phase. Full benefits included, of course, and we could arrange the schedule to allow you to continue at the airport part-time if you wish. That's very generous, Terrell managed, his mind spinning with possibilities. With that kind of money, he could pay off his mother's medical bills in months, not years. He could help his sister finish nursing school without taking on more debt. He might even be able to restart his own education. It's market rate for your expertise, Alexandra replied simply. I don't overpay or underpay. I value skills appropriately. She slid a folder across the table. The details are in here, along with an NDA. Take it home, read it carefully, ask any questions. Terrell accepted the folder, still somewhat dazed by the turn his life was taking. Why me? He asked suddenly. You must know dozens of engineers with more formal education and experience. Alexandra's expression softened slightly. Do you know what the biggest problem is in tech companies like mine? He shook his head. Groupthink. Everyone has the same background, same education, same approach to problems. We need people who think differently, who approach problems from unusual angles. She gestured to his tablet with the project photos. You do that naturally. She checked. Her watch. A slim, elegant timepiece that probably cost as much as a car. I have another meeting, but my assistant will follow up tomorrow. Feel free to call if you have questions after reviewing the materials. As they stood to leave, Alexandra held his gaze. One more thing, Terrell. This opportunity isn't charity or a feel-good hire. I don't do that. This is business. I believe you'll bring value to my company, and I'm willing to pay for that value. Don't waste this chance. The directness of her words might have offended some people, but Terrell appreciated the honesty. I won't, he promised. Back in the black car heading toward his apartment, Terrell opened the folder and began reading the details of what could be his new life. The compensation was even more impressive when broken down with all the benefits, and the flexibility of the schedule would allow him to continue caring for his mother. As the city passed by outside the tinted windows, Terrell felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. Just yesterday, his future had seemed fixed. Endless double shifts at the airport, years of struggling to pay off medical bills, dreams permanently on hold. Now, suddenly, everything was changing because he'd been in the right place at the right time with the right skills. Or maybe, he thought as he traced his finger over the Winter Innovations logo on the contract, it wasn't about luck at all. Maybe it was about the thousands of hours he'd spent learning aircraft systems, the countless repairs he'd performed, the problems he'd solved when others couldn't. Maybe this opportunity hadn't found him by chance. Maybe he'd been building toward it all along without even realizing it. The car pulled up outside his apartment building and the driver opened his door. Mr. Jackson, the man said respectfully, Ms. Winters asked me to give you this. He handed Terrell a small box. Inside was a business card holder made of brushed steel with Terrell's name engraved on it. It contained new cards with the Winter Innovations logo and his name with the title, Aviation Systems Consultant. She'd been that confident he would accept. And looking at the cards with his name printed in clean professional lettering, Terrell knew she was right. The sun was just breaking over the horizon as Alexandra's private jet touched down in San Francisco. Tyrell sat by the window, watching the city come into view, still trying to process how quickly his life had changed. 3 months had passed since he'd first fixed Alexandra's jet on that fateful night, and now here he was, flying with her to one of the most important business meetings of her career. "Nervous?" Alexandra asked, noticing his grip on the armrest. "Not about flying," Tyrell replied with a small smile. "More about meeting your board of directors. They're just people," she said, closing her laptop. "Extremely wealthy. Often difficult people, but still just people." In the past 3 months, Tyrell had transitioned from airport mechanic to one of Alexandra's most trusted technical advisors. What had started as a consulting position 3 days a week had quickly expanded. His ability to spot flaws in designs that looked perfect on paper, but would fail in real-world conditions, had saved the company millions in development costs. "Remember," Alexandra said, as the jet taxied to a private hangar, "you're the expert in that room when it comes to practical aircraft systems. Don't let anyone intimidate you." Tyrell nodded, adjusting his tie. The tailored suit he wore still felt strange after years of work uniforms, but he had to admit the quality made a difference. It had been Alexandra's suggestion, or rather her insistence, that he upgrade his wardrobe for meetings like today's. "These people respect competence above all else," she'd explained while her personal shopper took his measurements. "But first impressions matter. The right clothes are part of the language of business." As they disembarked, a sleek black SUV was waiting on the tarmac. Alexandra's assistant, Philip, greeted them with tablets containing the latest updates for the meeting. "The board members have all arrived," he informed them as they settled into the vehicle. "And the Jensen team is already setting up in Conference Room A." Jensen Aerospace was one of Winter Innovation's biggest competitors, specializing in next-generation aircraft design. Today's meeting would determine whether Alexandra's company would acquire Jensen or form a strategic partnership instead. The decision hinged largely on the technical assessment Tyrell had prepared. During the drive to Winter Innovation's San Francisco headquarters, Tyrell reviewed his notes one more time. His report was thorough, detailing both the strengths and weaknesses of Jensen's technology. He'd spent weeks analyzing their patents, prototypes, and production methods. "You look worried," Alexandra observed, glancing up from her own tablet. "Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything," Tyrell admitted. "You didn't," she said with quiet confidence. "That's why you're here." The Winter Innovations building dominated the skyline, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that reflected the morning sun. Security was tight, with multiple checkpoints before they reached the executive floor. The boardroom was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the bay, while a massive table of polished wood dominated the center of the room. Around it sat 15 men and women in expensive suits, all rising as Alexandra entered. "Good morning," she greeted them, her voice carrying effortlessly across the space. "Thank you all for accommodating the schedule change. I believe it will prove worthwhile." She introduced Tyrell with a simple, "This is Tyrell Jackson, our aviation systems integration specialist. He's prepared the technical assessment you've all received." As Tyrell took his seat, he felt the weight of their scrutiny. These people controlled billions in investments and made decisions that affected thousands of jobs. 3 months ago, he'd been tightening bolts on landing gear. Now he was sitting at the table where industry-changing deals were made. The meeting began with standard financial presentations. Tyrell listened carefully, absorbing the business aspects that had once been foreign to him, but were now becoming familiar territory. Alexandra had made sure he understood not just the technical side, but also the business implications of his work. "Now, let's move to the technical assessment," the board chairman announced, turning all eyes to Tyrell. "Mr. Jackson, would you walk us through your findings?" Taking a deep breath, Tyrell stood and moved to the front of the room. The massive display screen came to life with his presentation. "Jensen Aerospace has developed 3 key technologies that would be valuable acquisitions," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Their lightweight composite materials show a 22% improvement over current industry standards. Their fuel management system has demonstrated 15% greater efficiency in test flights, and their noise reduction technology is currently the best on the market. He moved through his slides methodically, explaining complex technical concepts in terms the board members could understand. This was a skill Alexandra had helped him develop, translating his mechanical knowledge into language that resonated with executives. However, Terrell continued, coming to the critical part of his assessment, there are significant integration challenges. Jensen's systems were designed as standalone components, not as part of a unified platform. He brought up detailed diagrams showing potential failure points. Based on my analysis, retrofitting these technologies into our existing product line would require extensive modifications that would negate much of the cost savings. Additionally, their production methods aren't scalable to our volume requirements without substantial investment. One of the board members, a sharp-eyed woman with steel-gray hair, leaned forward. Your report suggests their noise reduction technology isn't compatible with our new engine design. Could you elaborate? Terrell nodded, appreciating the direct question. Jensen's system relies on active cancellation that works well in stable acoustic environments. But our new turbofan creates variable frequency patterns that would overwhelm their current algorithms. We'd essentially have to rebuild their system from the ground up. For the next 20 minutes, Terrell fielded increasingly technical questions. This was where he shined, not in boardroom politics, but in his deep understanding of how things actually worked in the real world. Alexandra watched from her seat at the head of the table, her expression neutral but her eyes showing approval. When the technical portion concluded, Alexandra took over, guiding the conversation toward strategic decisions. Based on Terrell's assessment, I believe acquisition would be less advantageous than a targeted partnership focused on their composite materials technology. The discussion continued through lunch, with board members reeking into smaller groups. Terrell found himself engaged in conversation with the chief financial officer, explaining how the right manufacturing approach could reduce implementation costs. By mid-afternoon, a consensus was forming. Alexandra skillfully guided the final decision. Winter Innovations would pursue a limited partnership with Jensen focused on joint development of the composite materials technology. As the board members filed out, several stopped to compliment Terrell on his thorough analysis. The gray-haired woman who had questioned him earlier handed him her business card. Impressive work, she said simply. We need more people who understand both theory and application. When the room had cleared except for Alexandra and Terrell, she finally allowed herself a smile. Well done. Your assessment changed several minds today, including some who are not easily persuaded. Just telling it like I see it, Terrell said, loosening his tie slightly. That's exactly why you're valuable, she replied, gathering her papers. Now, we have about 2 hours before our return flight. There's something I want to show you. They took Alexandra's private elevator down to the research and development floor, a massive space filled with prototypes, testing equipment, and engineers working at various stations. Unlike the hushed formality of the executive floor, this level hummed with activity and creative energy. Alexandra led him to a secured area at the far end of the floor. After a retinal scan, the doors slid open to reveal a laboratory unlike anything Terrell had seen before. This is Project Horizon, she explained as they entered. Our most advanced initiative, and until now, known to only 12 people in the company. The centerpiece of the lab was what appeared to be an aircraft engine, but unlike any conventional design. Its configuration was radical, components arranged in ways that defied traditional engineering. Is that? Terrell began, moving closer to examine it. A quantum magnetohydrodynamic propulsion system, Alexandra confirmed. Theoretical until now. This is our third prototype. Terrell circled the engine slowly, his mind racing to understand what he was seeing. This would revolutionize aviation if it works. That's the problem, Alexandra said, her expression growing serious. It doesn't work. Not consistently anyway. The performance is erratic, sometimes exceeding our projections, other times failing completely. She gestured to the team of engineers working nearby. These are some of the brightest minds in the field, but they're stuck. They can make it work in simulations, but not in reality. The implication of why she'd brought him here dawned on Terrell. You want me to look at it? It wasn't a question, and Alexandra didn't treat it as one. Yes, this project represents potentially billions in value and years of advancement for aviation, but only if we can make it reliable. Terrell approached the engine again, this time with a more critical eye. He began asking questions about the testing protocols, material specifications, and failure patterns. The lead engineer, initially defensive, gradually opened up as Terrell's questions revealed a deep understanding of the practical challenges they faced. After an hour of examination and discussion, Terrell had formed some preliminary thoughts. Your simulation models aren't accounting for micro-vibrations in the containment housing, he explained, pointing to a specific section of the engine. In theory, this material should be stable, but in practice, it's creating resonance patterns that disrupt the field generators. The engineering team exchanged glances, clearly not having considered this possibility. Can it be fixed? Alexandra asked directly. Terrell considered for a moment. I think so. Not by changing the materials. They're the right choice. But by redesigning the mounting system to dampen those specific frequencies. He grabbed a tablet and quickly sketched a modified design, drawing on his years of experience with how engines behaved in actual flight conditions rather than laboratory settings. The lead engineer studied the sketch, his expression shifting from skepticism to tentative hope. This could work. We'd need to run simulations, build a test rig. Do it, Alexandra instructed. Priority status. As they left the lab and headed back upstairs, Alexandra was thoughtful. If you're right about this, it could be the breakthrough we've been searching for. It's just an educated guess at this point, Terrell cautioned. Your educated guesses have proven remarkably accurate so far, she replied. That's why I wanted you to see Project Horizon now, before we head back. The team needed a fresh perspective, from someone who understands the gap between theory and application. They reached the roof where the helicopter waited to take them back to the airport. As they rose above the city, the setting sun painted the bay in shades of gold and orange. 3 months ago, Terrell would have been finishing his shift at the airport, tired and worried about bills. Now he was flying over San Francisco after potentially helping solve a problem that could change the future of aviation. Penny for your thoughts? Alexandra asked over the headset. Just thinking about how much has changed, he admitted. Sometimes it doesn't seem real. She studied him for a moment. You know, most people would be intimidated by today, the board, meeting, Project Horizon. But you handled it all like you've been doing it for years. Still learning, Terrell said modestly. Aren't we all? Alexandra replied with a rare smile. That's what makes it interesting. As the helicopter banked toward the airport where her private jet waited, Terrell realized something important. Despite all the changes in his circumstances, the salary that had cleared his mother's medical debts, the new apartment, the respect from industry leaders, the core of who he was remained unchanged. He was still the same person who found satisfaction in solving problems others couldn't, who believed in doing things right rather than doing them quickly. Alexandra seemed to read his thoughts. The truly valuable people in this world, she said as the helicopter began its descent, are those who remain themselves regardless of circumstances. That's rarer than you might think. In that moment, watching the golden light fade from the bay, Terrell understood that his life had been transformed not by luck or chance, but by the recognition of his true worth. Something he had always possessed, but that had taken Alexandra Winter's keen eye to truly see. 1 year had passed since that fateful night on the runway. Terrell stood at the window of his office at Winter Innovations headquarters, watching aircraft taking off and landing at the nearby airport. His office was spacious, with walls decorated with technical drawings and a shelf displaying his growing collection of patents, 6 so far with 3 more pending. His phone buzzed with a message from Alexandra. Meeting in 10. Bring the Horizon specs. Terrell gathered his tablet and the secure folder containing the latest test results. Project Horizon had evolved dramatically over the past year, largely thanks to his practical modifications to the original design. The quantum magneto-hydrodynamic propulsion system was no longer a brilliant but inconsistent prototype. Now it was a functioning technology preparing for its first public demonstration. Walking through the research and development floor, Terrell exchanged greetings with engineers and technicians. Many had been skeptical when he first joined the company, the mechanic without an advanced degree who somehow had the CEO's ear. But results spoke louder than credentials, and his ability to bridge the gap between theoretical design and practical application had earned their respect. The conference room was already full when he arrived. Alexandra sat at the head of the table, engaged in conversation with investors and board members. She looked up as he entered, giving him a subtle nod. "Now that Terrell's here, we can begin," she said, bringing the room to order. "As you know, tomorrow's demonstration of Project Horizon represents a pivotal moment for this company. We're about to reveal technology that will redefine aviation as we know it." She turned to Terrell. "Would you update everyone on the final test results?" Terrell connected his tablet to the display system. "Yesterday's final test flight exceeded all performance metrics," he began, showing the data. "Fuel efficiency is 340% better than our most advanced conventional engines. Noise reduction is nearly complete. At cruising altitude, the system is almost silent. And most importantly, reliability has held steady at 99.7% across all test conditions." One of the investors leaned forward. "What about the cooling issue that was flagged last month?" "Resolved," Terrell said confidently. "We redesigned the thermal management system to distribute heat more effectively. The solution was surprisingly simple once we identified the problem." The meeting continued for another hour, covering logistics for the demonstration, security protocols, and marketing strategy. Throughout it all, Terrell noticed how Alexandra consistently directed technical questions to him rather than answering herself, even though she understood the technology perfectly. She was making sure everyone in the room recognized his expertise and contribution. When the meeting concluded, Alexandra asked Terrell to stay behind. "Walk with me," she said once they were alone. They took the elevator to the roof garden, a green oasis atop the building where employees could relax and enjoy panoramic views of the city. At this hour, it was deserted. "Nervous about tomorrow?" she asked as they strolled along a path bordered by flowering plants. "A little," Terrell admitted. "A lot riding on this demonstration. About $4.3 billion in potential contracts, to be precise," Alexandra said with a slight smile. "But that's not why I wanted to talk to you." She stopped at the railing overlooking the city. "I received an interesting offer this morning, private. Equity firm wants to acquire Winter Innovations. The number they're proposing is substantial." Terrell felt a twinge of concern. "Are you considering it?" "I'm always considering all options," she replied pragmatically. "But no, I won't be selling. This company has always been about creating technologies that matter, not maximizing short-term profit." She turned to face him directly. "Which brings me to why I asked you here. I'm restructuring the executive team, creating a new division focused exclusively on next-generation propulsion systems. Project Horizon will be just the beginning." Terrell nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I want you to lead it," she said simply. "As Chief Technology Officer." The words hung in the air between them. Terrell blinked, processing what she just said. "I don't have the qualifications for that position," he said finally. Alexandra gave him a look that was both amused and exasperated. "After everything you've accomplished this past year, you still think that way? Your 6 patents have already generated more revenue than most of our senior engineers' entire portfolios. Project Horizon wouldn't be viable without your contributions. And the team respects you, which matters more than any degree." "It's a big step," Terrell said carefully. "It is," she agreed, "and I wouldn't offer it if I didn't believe you were ready." The salary would double, of course, the stock options, the usual executive package. Money had stopped being Terrell's primary motivation months ago. His mother's medical bills were paid, his sister had graduated from nursing school with no debt, and he'd even managed to buy a modest but comfortable house not far from his mother's care facility. "I'd need to finish my engineering degree," he said after a moment. Alexandra nodded. "Already arranged. MIT has an executive education program that would accommodate your schedule. The company would cover all costs, naturally." Of course, she'd thought of everything. That was who Alexandra was, always 3 steps ahead. "This isn't charity or a reward for Project Horizon," she added, echoing words she'd said to him that first day over lunch. "It's strategy. You see solutions others miss. You understand both the science and the practical application. That combination is rare and exactly what we need in this role." Terrell looked out over the city, thinking of the journey that had brought him here. From working double shifts fixing landing gear to potentially becoming a C-level executive at one of the world's most innovative companies, it seemed impossible, yet here he was. "I'd like some time to think about it," he said finally. "Of course," Alexandra replied, "but not too long. After tomorrow's demonstration, things will move quickly." As they headed back inside, she added, "One more thing. The test aircraft for tomorrow, I want you to pilot it." This caught Terrell completely by surprise. "What? I'm not a test pilot." "You have a private pilot's license, correct? And you've logged over 50 hours in the simulator with this specific aircraft." "Yes, but the regular test pilot will be in the cockpit with you," she continued. "But you designed many of the critical systems. You understand this aircraft better than anyone. And symbolically, it matters that the person who helped create this technology is the one to demonstrate it." Before he could protest further, she added, "I'll be on board as well." Terrell stopped walking. "You're planning to be on the first public flight of an experimental aircraft?" "Of course," she said, as if it were obvious. "I don't ask others to take risks I wouldn't take myself." With that, she checked her watch and excused herself for another meeting, leaving Terrell with much to consider. That evening, rather than going straight home, Terrell drove to his mother's care facility. Since her stroke 2 years ago, her recovery had been slow but steady. The quality care he could now afford had made a significant difference. He found her in the garden, working with her physical therapist on her walking. Her face lit up when she saw him. "There's my boy," she said, her speech still slightly slurred but much improved from a year ago. After the therapist left, Terrell sat with his mother and told her about Alexandra's offer. She listened carefully, pride shining in her eyes. "What do you think, Mom?" he asked when he'd finished. She took his hand in hers. "I think you've always been capable of great things, even when circumstances tried to hold you back." This Alexandra saw what I've always known. "It's a huge responsibility," he said. "And I'm not sure I'm qualified." His mother gave him a knowing smile. "When you were 10 years old, you took apart our broken refrigerator and fixed it when the repairman said it couldn't be done. You've never let 'I'm not qualified' stop you before. Why start now?" Her simple faith in him, unchanged since childhood, brought unexpected tears to his eyes. "I'm flying the test aircraft tomorrow," he told her. "First public demonstration. Then, I'll be watching the news," she said confidently. "My son, the aviation pioneer." Driving home under a sky full of stars, Terrell made his decision. The path forward was clear, even if it was daunting. The next morning dawned bright and clear, perfect conditions for the demonstration. The private airfield was filled with media, industry executives, military officials, and potential investors. Security was tight, with access carefully controlled. In the preparation room, Terrell put on the specialized flight suit designed for Project Horizon pilots. The material contained sensors to monitor the pilot's vital signs during exposure to the unique electromagnetic fields generated by the propulsion system. The test pilot, a veteran aviator named Chen, joined him for the final briefing. "Nervous?" he asked with a friendly smile. "Terrified," Terrell admitted. Chen laughed. "Good. Only fools aren't scared their first time flying experimental aircraft. But don't worry. The simulator training you've done is excellent preparation, and I'll be right beside you if anything unexpected happens." When they entered the hangar where the aircraft waited, a hush fell over the gathered crowd. The Horizon prototype didn't look radically different from conventional jets at first glance. The revolutionary technology was mostly hidden within its sleek frame. But the absence of visible engines and the unusual configuration of its wings hinted at something extraordinary. Alexandra was speaking to the assembled guests, her voice confident and clear. "Today marks the beginning of a new era in aviation, one that promises cleaner, quieter, and vastly more efficient air travel." She spotted Terrell and gestured for him to join her. "And now, I'd like to introduce the man whose practical genius helped turn theoretical science into functioning technology, our Director of Systems Integration and soon-to-be Chief Technology Officer, Terrell Jackson." The announcement of his new position caught Terrell by surprise. Apparently, Alexandra had decided for him, but as he looked at the aircraft they'd created together, he knew she was right. This was where he belonged. Addressing the crowd briefly, Terrell explained in simple terms how the new propulsion system worked and what it would mean for the future of flight. Then it was time for the demonstration. Alexandra joined them at the aircraft dressed in her own flight suit. Together with Chen, they performed the pre-flight checks, which were broadcast on screens for the audience to watch. As they settled into the cockpit, Chen in the captain's seat, Terrell as first officer, and Alexandra in the observer's position, Chen spoke into his headset. "Horizon 1 to control, requesting clearance for demonstration flight." "Horizon 1, you are cleared for takeoff," came the response. "Winds calm, visibility unlimited." Terrell's hands moved over the controls with practiced precision. The aircraft's systems came alive, displays glowing with information. The quantum drive spooled up, creating a faint humming that was barely perceptible even inside the cockpit. "All systems nominal," Terrell reported. "Drive stability at 100%. Chen gave him a nod. "Your aircraft, Terrell." Taking a deep breath, Terrell grasped the controls. "My aircraft." The Horizon prototype moved forward, accelerating smoothly. Unlike conventional jets, there was no roaring of engines, just a gentle rise in the humming as the quantum drive increased power. Before they reached half the usual takeoff distance, the aircraft lifted effortlessly into the sky. From the back seat, Alexandra spoke quietly. "Well done, Terrell. Or should I say, Chief Technology Officer Jackson." As the revolutionary aircraft climbed into the clear blue sky, performing flawlessly just as he had known it would, Terrell felt a profound sense of rightness. 1 year ago, he had been struggling to pay bills, fixing other people's aircraft on the night shift. Today, he was helping to create the future of aviation. "CTO Jackson," he replied with a smile in his voice. "I think I could get used to that." The aircraft banked gracefully over the airfield, visible to the crowd below who were witnessing history in the making. And in a care facility across town, Terrell's mother watched the live broadcast on television, tears of pride in her eyes as she saw her son's dream taking flight.